Bishop Doug, I think we're ready.
Sure. Well, welcome everyone. This will be a great couple of hours, and later on I'll talk a little bit more about Lorenzo, but I'm so glad he could make the time in a very busy schedule to be with us tonight. So let's pray. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Living God, our hearts are breaking for the people of Ukraine and for all who live in war-torn places. Be with those who live in fear this night. Show the leaders of nations the pathway to peace. We gather amid the uncertainty and fear in our world to remember our call to imagine, to try new things, to be brave enough to fail, until we find where human longing and our faith might meet in ministry. Open our hearts to this co-creative work with you, until the earth breathes free and all people know your justice. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Well, it's a pleasure to welcome Lorenzo here. This notion of try new things. Lorenzo, you might not know this, but 10 years ago, almost to the day, when the people of Western Massachusetts was looking for a new bishop and they put forward a profile, the thing that drew me to this place was it was actually in bold print that said, we want a bishop that will try 50 new things, even if 49 of them fail. So that's the diocese you're coming into. So thank you so much for your time. So for all of you, Lorenzo is the founding director of TriTank, the experimental lab for church growth and innovation. He's responsible for the entire process of development and implementation of experiments for innovation in the church. Prior to launching TriTank, Lorenzo was the Chief Development Officer for the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles. And you also might have encountered Lorenzo as the host of Inside General Convention, a daily bilingual broadcast from General Convention 79 in Austin, Texas. I was there, it was 108 degrees every day. And you still did your job, thank you.
In a suit.
In a suit. He's the author of How to Try, and has been on the road since its publication, sharing this strategy for church innovation. His next stop, as we talked about before, this was in Scotland, and he'll also present to the Church of England. We're very glad to have you with our leaders, Lorenzo. Thank you so much for making this time for us.
Thank you for having me, Bishop. And thank you all for taking the time on a random Thursday for your gatherings. I know that there's always other things that pull at us. So thank you for taking this time to join me. I hope that the next, the time that we're going to spend together will actually be more of a way for us. When Vicky first reached out to me, and I saw that I don't know if you call it a slogan, but or a tagline, I see it more as a vision for your diocese, that it is about God's abundance. Because as I talk to people about the future of the church, part of my work is to look ahead 10 years or so for the church and to try to figure out where's the church going to be. And then we can try to aim a little bit towards there. You all know hockey well, right? Wayne Gretzky, aim to where the puck is going, not where it is. And as we do this work, I can tell you that the church is going to change drastically in the next 10 years. We have, for the first time ever, for any of us who are alive, we have two generations that are coming of age that have no real tangible connection to Christianity. They are spiritual, but they don't have it to Christianity. So they're not naturally going to find their way to our red doors. And that should be an invitation for us of opportunity, that God perhaps is asking us to do something different than how we've always done it. One of my favorite stories from scripture is when Jesus goes back out into the boat and says, yeah, do it on the other side. It's like, no, we've been out all night. There's nothing. There are no fish there, Jesus. Like, yeah, try it on the other side. And they tried, and of course, it's overflowing. And so this abundance is a mindset. And hopefully what we'll talk about tonight will help you as you sit in that place of abundance with that mindset to actually have a framework with which to try. I have bumped into many, many people who are really well-meaning people who want to try things for the church. I don't think any of us are so much scared of that. I think what we're really afraid of is failing for the church. And I'm glad to hear about the 50 and that 49 could fail, because you're going to fail more. I fail more often. I was once being introduced as like, and Lorenzo fails often. And Lorenzo's all about failure. And Lorenzo, I was like, could we drop a little bit about the failure? There's been a success or two in there too. It's not all about the failure, but it is an important part because we learned from it. So what we're going to talk about tonight is a simple sort of framework that you can use in this work. I hope that it'll be informative. I do have one little housekeeping sort of thing to mention to you. That is that I, on purpose, have overfilled my slides with copy. Don't worry, they're not like the Bible in small print, but they have enough copy on there because what I would hope tonight that we can do is that we can actually have this conversation and not so much about you all taking notes. You will get, in fact, Vicky already has a PDF of the slides that I'm about to go through. So when you get this recording tomorrow morning, you will get all the slides in there. So rather, I want you to engage with me as if though we were sitting around a table having a beer or having a Diet Coke, and which I actually am, to actually just have this conversation about, let me teach you how we do the work we do. And I think that you'll find it satisfying in how you can do your work. All right. If you have any questions throughout, I encourage you to just, unless it's like something that just really needs to be clarified, if you can just sort of hold them a little bit till I'll have pauses in between and ask for questions between when we go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. There's only 3 steps. Very Trinitarian that way. So just sort of hold your questions a little bit that way. And hopefully I think that we'll be able to do this as a conversation. All right. Does that sound like a plan to everyone? Everyone with me? Yay, here we go. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can begin. And there you are, celebrating God's abundance. Woot, woot. So let's go ahead and begin. So this is what we'll do tonight. We'll talk a little bit about TriTank for those of you that may not be familiar and are telling yourself right now, like are writing, Dear Bishop Doug, who is this crazy guy? And then we'll talk a little bit about what you sort of need to do or think about before you start. And then we'll talk about the 3 steps of trying, which is generating insights, developing ideas, and finally, how do you try? All right, so let's go ahead and begin here. What is TriTank? Well, first of all, we ourselves are an experiment. Virginia Theological Seminary and General Theological Seminary came together to build this place that was about thinking of ways of the future for the church, for church growth and innovation, as you heard Bishop Doug talk about. But what we're not really a think tank. We wanted to not just put ideas that we can put up on a shelf and be like, oh, there we are, more ideas for people to just sort of ponder about, and in the Episcopal Twitter sphere, make comments about. What we wanted to do was actually go out with those ideas. Is it a way to save the church? Absolutely not. This is God's church, and if God needs to save God's church, God will do that. We just need to be faithful. So this is also not that silver bullet. Rather, the way that we like to think of TriTank is that we're a place where we can ask what if a lot. All of us who have been in ministry or have been at a church at one point or another have probably wondered, what if we did that differently? What if instead of that being over there was over there? Or, I mean, even some of the more like heretical things, like what if the service wasn't on Sunday morning? What if it was on a Thursday night? Would more people show up? Turns out they are, by the way, in some places. So it's all these places, all these times we've asked, what if, but we didn't have the resources or the time or the energy to do this. If you're a single priest congregation and you have a good vestry, you're just sort of going with the day to day. Imagine if you have any ideas like, how am I going to start this? So this is why this framework helps in doing that work of actually moving beyond it. So that's what TriTank wanted to do. And we wanted to model that for the church. So as you probably, if you've ever thought about innovation in the church, this is probably how the model worked. It was you think of an idea, you pray about it, write it out, form a committee, hold listening sessions, write a paper again, go to a conference, do theological reflection, write it about it, and talk about it in the diocese amongst your other colleagues, discern some more, bring it to the vestry. They'll say no the first time. Then you bring it back to the vestry, and eventually you end up trying it that way. That's how innovation has sort of worked for the church. We're like, what if there was an easier model? What if we just tried it? What if we just went out before we even thought about whether or not there was a deep theological meaning as to why we were doing something, that we would just go out and try it. And then if it works, figure out, oh, where is God in this? Not can we bring God into this, but rather where is God in this work? So that's how we launched ourselves in January of 2019. So we wanted to ask a lot, what if? It's a chance to dedicate time and energy and effort to this. If you think about it, we're kind of like the R&D department. for the church. We'd like to think so. And we're always seeking ideas and partners. We have about 400 partner congregations, which is why I always say that the best way to know about what we do is our experiments. That's really what will tell you who we are. And there, by the way, that's me at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, where they do all the new gadgets in January of 2019, talking to a guy from MIT about design thinking. And we were on the floor. We couldn't find a table. So we were like, oh, let's just make it happen. So here's our one of the first early experiments that we did. It's called the Alexa Prayer Skill. In fact, I'm going to start the video.
Hey friends, it's Father Lorenzo, and I'm going to teach you how to use the Alexa skill. Once you have enabled the skill using the link on this page, simply do what I'm about to do. Alexa, open Episcopal prayer.
The Lord be with you.
Why, thank you. And also with you.
Let us pray.
On this day the Lord has acted. We will rejoice and be glad in it.
And there you have it. Now you're
Stop
praying
playing it, actually.
with Alexa.
Stop playing, I
daily.
said. Let me go back here. And you might be like, wow, that's kind of cute, but just a cute little thing, Lauren. So actually, on the contrary, what we knew from research is that if people engage with scripture at least 4 times a week, they're more likely to go to church on Sunday. So we wanted to lower the barrier for people to be able to engage with scripture so that they would be more likely to go to church on Sunday. This ministry has been passed on to Forward Movement. And on average, about 500 people on a regular basis are praying the daily office with Alexa, both morning and evening, by the way. So it's just it's not just a cool, it is actually a great party trick. If you're at someone's house, you no longer have to enable the skill on the website. Amazon called us one of the most engaged skills on Alexa because the same people it wasn't the sheer number of people, but the fact that those people kept coming back day after day after day for their spiritual practice. So that was just a little thing that we tried and it seems to be working. It's now a ministry. Something else that we did. So here's something you may or may not know. I don't know how many of your congregations are like this, but in the Episcopal Church, we have about 5,800 congregations, give or take. Of those, 1,730 have 29 or fewer people on a Sunday. So out of the almost 6,000 congregations, about a third, 1,730, have 29 or fewer people on a Sunday. These congregations, in a lot of ways, may have a retired clergy person filling in. Sometimes they don't have a clergy person. They may have a supply priest permanently, and they don't get breaks. It's a hardship for them. And I actually had heard amongst all my travels that there was a congregation that actually a woman got up and read an article from Reader's Digest as the sermon. Nothing against Reader's Digest, but I'm going to guess that the Jesus count was pretty low that Sunday in that sermon. So we said, how can we provide some resources to show them you don't have to be a mega church, but you can still have depth and really good stuff in your congregation, and also provide some breaks for the clergy who might be helping you out. So we teamed up with the brothers from the SSJE right down the street from you all, and we actually did a thing called Virtual Supply Priests. Now we changed the name, actually. It's now called the Virtual Preaching Monks. And it started it last Advent. And we thought that we would actually end up, the 1,730 congregations, maybe we'd end up with 30, maybe 40 congregations that would take us up on our offer. For Advent, we had 484 congregations take us up on the offer to use the monks so they're doing it again now for Lent. We have more than 700, I think 750 was the last number I saw from the monks that are using it now. We also allow some people to use it as individuals. So if you can more or less cut that number by half, because some individuals are using it, their small congregation may not be using it, but they themselves are availing themselves of this, which is fine. But about 50% of them are congregations who are using them for either their sermon or they're taking the written sermon and reading it. It's just a resource that we're providing to help small congregations thrive, even though they're smaller. This next one is connected congregation. What we tried, this actually, as it worked out, we started this before the pandemic, which is we know from statistics that if you send people an email, hey, we're going to have Shrove Tuesday, or hey, we're going to have a meeting about this, or hey, we're going to have this special event, Bible study, whatever it is, and they see the email, fine, you have a certain number of people to show up. But if you text them the day of, then the numbers that we saw are between 25 and 35% more likely to show up. So why not avail ourselves of that? It's a very cheap technology to use. As it also turns out, not only did it keep the congregation together and allows people to show up more regularly, because otherwise they forget in a lot of ways. But secondary, what it does is it allows you to do two things. One is the priest or someone at the church who's the prayer person could be assigned, and you can schedule it so that it'll send out an email, a text message to certain members of the congregation on a Thursday at 10 a.m. And so you might get it and said, hey, Rich, it's Father Lorenzo. Just want to let you know that I'm praying for you today. Is there anything in particular you need me to pray for? What you're doing there is connecting more with the people of the congregation, and thus they feel more connected to the congregation. And that has been proven to work as well. They feel like they belong. They're like, and it's all done by computer. It's not like you're having to sit there with your phone like, oh my God, this is so many texts all one at a time. You do it all by computer. The technology is there. And during the pandemic, when the pandemic started, it was actually an amazing way to connect with people in the congregation very quickly, and just to let them know, okay, we will be closed this Sunday, and we need you to know this was back when 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, back like a gazillion years ago when all this started. So that was this one, also a success. And this one, I'll start the video on this one now. What it was, we know that we're going to a cashless society. So what we wanted to figure out is there a way that people can use their credit cards to make a donation as the collection plate goes by? So we created a digital collection plate. This is a little bit bigger than what we wanted. It's still fairly small, but if you see the little square right above the red lighting, that's actually now in version 2. That's all it will be. It'll be just this. And it'll have an amount. You tap the amount and it'll do it. And it'll take 3 seconds. Because one of the things that the pandemic has done is we've gotten much more used to tapping. Tapping was big in Europe, not so much here in the States, but now it's all about tapping or with your iPhone. So that's, again, all we're trying to figure out is like, where's the future going to be? How do we allow people to participate with the church fully, even if they don't have, cash on them? Yes, there are these society issues about what do we do with people that don't have a banking relationship? Those are social justice issues, absolutely. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't look at this work as well. Not all of them have worked, can I tell you that? So I had this bright idea. I was like, I have a feeling that people are going to group fitness classes and finding their community there. They're finding probably some of their spirituality there. And how many, have you all heard a little bit about a thing called Soul Cycle? Right? It's basically a spinning gym. All it is the little bicycles and you go in and spin. But when you go to a class there, the lights are dim. They have candles on the wall. It says, find your soul. You're like, that's interesting. And the person, when they're leading the class, they're all about like, hey, today was made just for you. So take advantage of this day. Don't let this day. I'm like, if you throw a Jesus in there, you're kind of doing a sermon. So I was like, oh, wait, what if we do? What if we do make it fully about Jesus? And so I had this bright idea. What happens if we mix a Eucharist and a spinning class? And thus was created Spin Church. And we advertised it. This is what we did, by the way. About some 27,000 people saw our Facebook ads. 86% of them were women, which is what we were sort of going for. They saw the ads about 160,000 times. So it means they saw the ads multiple times each. About 1,200 people actually did something with the ads. They shared them or they commented on them. So that was a click-through rate of 1.4, which is 3 times higher than what Facebook anticipates. But only 9 people sort of signed up for it, and none of them actually came to the class. It was more of they liked, and so we tried it for 8 weeks. And when we get to the trying part, you'll see why we did it the way we did, the minimum viable prototype. So we didn't go out and build a spinning studio to then figure out that it wasn't going to work for us. And yes, if you see the face of the deacon that was there with me, I think she kind of knew where this was all going. She's like, I'm a little dubious, Lorenzo, what you're doing here. So so it didn't necessarily work. Not all of them work. Like I mentioned earlier, about 2 out of 3 of them don't work. So that's just the way it is in this work of trying faithfully. All right, so that's hopefully tells you a little bit about what TriTank is, why it's so much fun to do the work we do. As I mentioned, by the way, we have about 400 congregations that partner with us. At the end, I'll let you know where our website is, where you can sign up for our newsletter. It comes up once a month. And in the newsletter is where we look for partners. We're like, hey, we're going to be trying this thing. Does anybody want to try it with us? Now let us move on to as we begin this work. So before anything else, always be mindful that this is about Jesus, that this is about spreading the good news of Jesus Christ and his gospel. So in all that we do, as much fun as I have in this, if I'm not centered on prayer, then I'm missing the boat. I need to be centered on prayer and that this is about Jesus. And that's why we're doing this. So which is why people are like, Lawrence, you're so honest in your newsletters when things don't work. I'm like, yeah, it's not an ego thing. I'm trying things for God. So yeah, I have no problem sharing with you. And my hope is that somebody will correct me one day and be like, haha, your problem was, and tell me what I didn't do right so that we can try it again and maybe it will work. So the first thing you want to do is sort of start thinking about it as a team. I believe that Jesus was a smart guy. Yeah, right. Like no heresy here, because he sent us out 2 by 2. And the difference that this makes is imagine that you're like in China or somewhere like that where you don't speak the language and you get lost and you're like, oh, I'm lost. I don't even know how I'm going to get back to wherever I'm going to get back to. I don't read. They don't speak. I don't speak. This is awful. Imagine the exact same scenario and you have your best friend with you. You're just as lost, but it no way feels the same. This is why having a team is important. So I want to talk to you briefly about building out a team so that you're not doing this work alone. And because the goal is not here to give more work just to the clergy person or to the vestry, we want to bring others into this work as we do it. When you're building your team, you want to look for people that also have excitement like you do about this work. That yes, there is abundance in God's kingdom. And yes, we can work towards it. And yes, we can try new things. You want to look for people that have skills that complement yours. So if you happen to be a good public speaker, then you don't necessarily need someone who's a good public speaker. You probably may need someone who's good at math, someone that can keep the numbers, or someone that's a good writer who can keep the notes of what we're doing and this work that we're doing. That sort of can help you out a little bit more. So complement the skills. You want to look for roles. There are some specific roles that you want to fill. Depends on what the experiment is. But what you want to do is make sure that you have someone's like, okay, we're going to have to partner with several community partners. Who has good connections in town? So who's a community outreach person? That's a role. Generally, numbers is a pretty good role. Have somebody that can do that, someone that can keep the notes, someone that can keep everything related to that. And then the other one that's an always sort of thing there is someone who's really well connected at the congregation, because we always want to be making sure that we're bringing people on board with us so that the stakeholders, nothing as powerful as an altar guild. Make sure that they're all coming on board and they're all sort of knowing the work that we're doing. So that's important to do as well. And then finally, you want to have some diversity on there. You don't want to have all male voices or all female voices. You don't want to have all white voices or all older voices if you're trying to reach younger people. By the way, not all of these people need to be members of your congregation. Let's say that one of the things you wanted to do was to reach out to younger people. One of the things you can do is just ask someone like, hey, who else can help us be on our team to sort of, and maybe it's not someone in your congregation who's like, hey, I have a cousin or a nephew who's willing, if we feed him pizza, he'll join us and be able to open to the conversation with us. That's great, because that's someone's voice who you otherwise would not be hearing as you're doing this work. So you want to make sure that you have diversity in the voices. I would recommend that you have between 3 and 5 people in your team. You can expand it when you're doing things, but the core team itself should be between 3 and 5, because if you're trying to coordinate the schedule of 8 people, 13 people, it's going to be really difficult to set up meetings. It's going to be really difficult to try to coordinate everybody's work. When you're getting to the brainstorming sessions, it could really get complicated. So 3 to 5 is a good size that you can do. You want to make sure that you're always communicating with everyone in the team, in particular, that you're communicating the insights. As you're going about this work, there's going to be these moments of aha, and those moments that you communicate those insights is extremely important. So once you have your team, right, these are energetic, excited people that you're having, what you're ready to begin. And that is step 1. You're going to generate some insights, right? There we are. This, by the way, is where churches do not usually begin in this work. Usually we begin at step number 2, which is coming up with ideas. Tell me you've never done this. Hey, how do we reach young people? Let's all sit around the table and we'll come up with ideas. And every day as I have more white hair, I can tell you that I'm probably not the person to do that without having some insights about what young people want these days. And so we sit around and we're like, oh, we should probably build them like a little skate park. Kids like skates, right? That's the thing they're into. And then you realize, no, they're all doing video games online because that's a potential career now. And that's what they want to do. You're like, oh, I had no idea about that because I'm almost 50 years old and I don't play video games. Oh, yeah, I'm the one, I've reached that age when I see the Grammys now, the Grammy list nominees. I'm like, I know none of the names. Can someone help me? Who are these actual names even? What happened to Bob? Wasn't there a Bob as a name once upon a time? Anyways, so you want to make sure that you begin with generating insights. So this is how we can do this part of it. The generating insights is relatively easy. Where's my thing here? Because you begin with a mindset of being curious, right? So imagine that you're about to begin a research project. The more that you even acknowledge that you don't know, the better off you'll be, because you'll be able to ask the right questions to then find out the knowledge. Let me explain it a little bit more. It all begins with a design question. A design question is something like, it just means, this is all, by the way, formulated around design thinking, which you may have thought about or heard about rather. This is design thinking, but what we're doing is we're making it for the church. So the design question is like the overall question that we're looking at. So it might be something like, should we add a contemporary service? How can we better serve our neighborhood as it changes? Should we open up a preschool? How can we bring in more revenue as revenue continues to plate and pledge is no longer able to match the needs that we have as a church? Can we find some other places that perhaps can do this for us? So the way you begin this, I know this is the weirdest part. You begin with secondary research. I know it's like, why not first research? No, begin with secondary research. So once you have your question, you want to begin with secondary research because you want to sort of look at the big picture, the macro picture of like, what do we know about young people? What do we know about contemporary services? When are they working? How are they working, right? How are these things sort of functioning out there? So as you're beginning the research, you want to define your goals. What are we trying to find out? Let us come up with a question here. Let's say, for example, that the question for us was, should we do a contemporary service? That seems to be something that people are asking regularly. Should we do a contemporary service? All right. So as we define our goals, what we want to do is we want to figure out, okay, in the US, and this is when we're beginning to frame our research. So in the US, how can we find out what there is about, like who's doing the contemporary services? And so we'd be like, well, it seems to me like the evangelical brothers and sisters seem to be doing that a lot. So what can we learn from there? So that would be one thing. We're beginning to frame like, okay, let's find out everything we can about how they do them. What does it look like? Is it the same? It is very much a liturgy in the sense that it follows a formula. Does it do this? Does it do that? There are things we can find out just by Googling. So once you sort of know the questions that you're trying to answer, then you can select and retrieve data from secondary research. And as you do that, you want to start to analyze it as it's coming in. It's like, okay, so it looks like they aim it at a younger demographic, but the younger demographic doesn't necessarily like to be there on Sunday mornings. You're comparing findings among, this is actually, I know this sounds weird and maybe just because I like to do this type of work, but sitting around with friends, your team, to go over these questions is actually kind of exciting because you're discovering things. It is a fun thing to do this work because you can start to draw some conclusions like, aha, seems like they go after young people and the ones that do better are the ones that are on weeknights. Okay, what does that tell us? Would we be able to do a service on a weeknight? What might that look like, right? You start to draw some conclusions. Like, it seems to me that a worship service always has to have a lot more music than what we've been used to. Would we be okay with that? How does it look like? Because you also want to, as you're drawing the conclusions, be like, are those kind of us or are we barking up the wrong tree when doing this work? And here is where you do the research, by the way. You go to Google. Barna, Pew, and Gallup are three. And if you don't know who they are, you can Google them. Barna primarily studies the evangelical community. Pew studies religion in America. Gallup studies a whole bunch of things, including religion in America. And you want to make sure that your data is at least, no more than 10 years old. A lot can happen in 10 years. We've got Facebook went from 1 to 2 billion users in 10 years. Where the iPhone was introduced, and then 10 years later, most of the world had a smartphone from a flip phone, right? So a lot can happen in 10 years. So you want to make sure that the data is 10 years or less, because otherwise it could be outdated. In other words, it's no longer valid for what you're trying to do. So when you have your research, you're going to start gaining some insights. It is inevitable. You might be like, well, it seems to be that the type of young people who are these types of people are the ones who go to the contemporary service. Great. Do we have those people around us? Are they around our congregation? How far will they have to drive? Are we near a university? Those are the types of things that allow you to start to frame and contextualize the research, that it is not just about, okay, remember, we're beginning with the macro, but we're eventually starting to move in more and more towards really what is 15-minute drive time of our congregation. That's what most of America seems to be their threshold as to what they're willing to travel, is 15 minutes. So as you're thinking about this contemporary service, you want to make sure that you start to bring it in locally. Like, do these people live here? Could I find a band, a worship band, if I wanted to? I heard of someone that actually found it for free because they just found young people who like Jesus and who wanted to play in front of an audience. So you can find all sorts of things as you're doing this work. And so just sort of keep that in mind, that you can actually just begin to make it more about you. Start to see the stuff that's national, does it match locally as well? So you're beginning with the secondary research. I've lost my mouse. There it is. You begin with the secondary research. Next, in this discovery of insights, what you want to do is you want to observe. You're like, aha. So it seems that there's these younger people that go to these contemporary service. Perfect. Is there a service like that near me? All right, let me go see it. Let me go see if people are going to that service. What kind of people are they? What do they look like? Do they have adaptations? What that means is, are some of these people just coming here because they provide really good childcare? And, do they come with 4 kids and then drop off the kids and not even go inside? They just sit outside in the cafe and wait for their kids. They're like, oh, we have like a date night. This is amazing. Okay. It tells you something. It gives you another insight that might be a need in your community. What you're trying to figure out is, what is it that people care about? Their body language can tell you a lot. If you go see them and they're just sort of sitting there and not paying attention, then I don't know. Or if they're up and about, then it's like, oh, that was actually enjoying it. You want to look for patterns, the little red thread where that's come, you see one person, you see one thing, you see 3 people, they're doing similar things. You're starting to figure out that there's a there, that they're all there. And particularly look for things that are unexpected, like, this doesn't seem to match the research we did. That's interesting. Or alternatively, this matches perfectly the research we did, but which we didn't think existed in our community. Very interesting as well, right? So that's what you want to do. You want to just observe. So imagine yourself as like a Sherlock Holmes that just goes around and is just taking notes, like, go on, do more of that. And then you can just solve a crime at the end of it. That would be the Sherlock Holmes way. So in observation, again, you want to define your area, no more than 15-minute drive time. You want to select the participants carefully. In other words, if you happen to see older people that are going into the contemporary service, that's not so much who you're looking at right now, because you're aiming it at a younger demographic, because that's sort of, you want to see whether or not it matches what you've been finding out. You want to carefully observe, capture the data. You can even take pictures. Try not to be that creepy person that takes pictures when no one's looking. Try to make it more about the group, not about the individual. And then you come back and share it with the team. It's like, all right, so I went to the service and here's what I saw. Or all of you go to the service and I bet you that all of you will see different things. It's just naturally the way it's kind of like Lectio Divina, right? We can hear the same passage and hear different things. If we all go see a contemporary service somewhere else, we're likely to see different things from it. If it happens to be that it's not in a non-denominational setting, you can also go to a more liturgical but contemporary service. I've seen those as well, learn from those as well. And that's what observation is. So we began with the secondary research, and you're moving into what's called primary research, which is a research that you are doing to see, to see whether or not the national sort of the macro is matching your area through observation. After you've done the observation, you're ready to have some conversations. And when you're thinking about conversations, you want to have open-ended questions. You're asking for examples, not generalities. And I'll give you an example in a moment. You want to start broad and then finish deep. So imagine that I was sitting down here and I was like, hey, Beth, I've actually, I don't know if I were in my office, I could show you. I have a little sign that says, "I'm a priest if you want to talk." And I sometimes take it with me at Starbucks or some. There's a place called Kofi where I have my office, and I sit there, and some people will just sit down and chat. And it so happens that I may be looking for some data about young people or this or some other, and you can just ask them questions like, "Hey, tell me about a time that you went to when was the last time you went to a religious service? What was it like?" "Oh, I went to this non-denominational church." "Oh, what did you like about it? Tell me some examples." Not generalized, like, "Oh, the music was great." It's like, "Oh, tell me more about that. What kind of music was it? What made it so great?" Right? The more you can get specific examples, you're building the rapport. You also want to make sure that you're minding the gap. What that means is if someone tells you, "Yeah, I'm like totally generous and I always went there because they did a lot of community service events." "Yeah, which times did you go?" "Well, I never really went to any of the community service events, but I really like the fact that it was like," can you tell me about that disconnect, right? You said you went there because they did a whole bunch of community service events, but you never went to them. You can see the same thing in other things. Like, "I like them because they did small groups." "Did you ever go to the small groups?" "No, I never went." It's like, okay, what's the disconnect there? You try to figure out why is what you're more aspirationally talking about, not exactly what you're doing in the end result with it. So you have the conversations, and the conversations, by the way, will give you more data. And remember, at the end of any of these, so you do the secondary research, you come back with your team and share about it. You do the observation, you come back with your team and share about it. You do your conversation, you come back and share about it. And that's also another benefit of having a team, because if I had to do, say, 6 interviews, it would take me a long time to find the right people to be able to do. Whereas if there's 3 of us on the team to do 6 interviews, well, each one of us only has to do 2. And if you have 5 people, only one has to do 2. The rest will just have to do 1. So having a team can help you go faster as you're doing this work as well. Then this next, and by the way, in all of these, although I am presenting them to you sequentially, and you don't have to do all of them. Some of them might not be to what you're doing. So this next one is called empathy experience. An empathy experience, I'll give you an example of this one. Soon after we all went into lockdown and church went digital, we all became televangelists sort of overnight. I was doing some interviews with people through Zoom, of course, because that's how you did it. And I was asking people, like, in particular, this guy, he was about 77, I want to say, in Palm Springs. And I was asking him, like, "Hey, tell me about, is it as spiritual for you? Is it, oh yeah, I really like it." And then one of the things all of a sudden he says, "It's good to have a plan B." I'm like, huh, what does that mean? Could you tell me what's a plan B? He said, "Well, sometimes when you get to be a certain age, you wake up and you have mobility issues and you hurt and you're unable to go to church on Sunday. And church is really important to you. So you either make yourself go to church and you're going to be in pain while you do that. And then you end up being in a bad mood at church." I'm like, "Oh, that explains a lot." Or 2, it could be that you don't go to church and you feel really bad. And that was my social outlet. Those are my friends and I'm unable to be with them. So having a plan B means that I'm still able to go to church, still able to worship God, even if I have one of those days, one of those bad days. I was like, that's amazing. And I looked it up. Turns out that about 2/3 of people above 70 will have mobility issues at one point or another. That was a totally brand new insight to me. I had no idea that this was happening, that this was a thing. And I was like, okay. But to really get a sense for the empathetic part of it, like, what does it mean to wake up and really have no control as to whether or not you'll be able to go or not go to church? So I planned this experience. I'm like, it has to be something that really matters to me, but it's totally up to chance whether or not I can do it. And this was right around Mother's Day in 2020. I said, here's my empathy experience. And this was my design. I brainstormed some ideas and then I did a design. And my design was, I'm going to set up Sunday, I'm going to call my mom for Mom's Day. That's something that I look forward to. It's just, I love my mom, want to do that. But I'm going to leave it totally up to chance. I'm going to wake up, and I'm going to pull a number. You can Google, give me a random number between 0 and 1 million. And if the number is odd, I will not call my mom. If the number is even, I will call her as planned. The number came out odd. And I cannot tell you how bad that felt. Oh, I had never felt, and for the first time, there was this moment where I was like, it was totally up to chance. It's something that I really wanted to do. I could not do simply because chance came up against me that day. And I ended the experiment. I wasn't going to let my mother suffer because I was running an experiment. Mom, I wanted to call you, but I couldn't. But it showed me through an empathy experience. So the reason why this is important, you know how earlier we were talking about those people that perhaps go to those services because they want to have a date night? Maybe that is very important. Maybe for them, that opportunity to have a night when they can just sit and be and not have to watch their 4 kids who are running around and they know that those kids are being taken care of. Maybe that's something that a community needs. So you can plan some empathy experiences to feel more like what they're feeling, just to see whether or not there's a there. Anyway, so that is what an empathy experience is. And you always want to come back and share with the team. What did you think of it? What was it like? Remember, all throughout this process, as you're doing these insights, you want to get others involved to make sure your stakeholders are all buying in. So if the rector has, for example, set a team of 3 to 5 people that doesn't include the rector, which is a great idea, then every once in a while you need to make sure that you're filling in the rector on what work is doing. Likewise, you need to fill in the rest of the vestry. I would even encourage you to fill in, make this a congregational thing, saying we're setting up this team to go and do these experiments. So we're going to commission them. In the little book that I wrote about this, there actually is a commissioning prayer for the work that they're about to do. And every once in a while they come back and this is why the public speaking part was important in your team. They come back and reports like, okay, here's what we're finding out. Because all of a sudden you may not know it, but someone in your congregation or one of the stakeholders might be like, oh, my buddy runs a PR firm that does this, and you might want to talk to them because they just spoke to the fill in the blank, and it's totally related to what you're looking at. You never know the connections that the Holy Spirit is making and able to make. So and also, of course, getting buy-in means that if and when it fails, no one can be like, well, you see, I told you all along that it wasn't going to work. It's like, nah, you were with us all along until it didn't work. People feel more involved in it. They want it to work. So if it doesn't work at the end, then it's okay, because we all like, oh man, we all thought that was going to work. Yeah. So make sure you're always getting the buy-in from others as you're doing the work. All right. So that was step 1. And now I'll take a little moment here just to make sure whether or not, are there any questions about generating insights before we move into, now that we have these insights, Lorenzo, what do we do? I will gladly take any questions live.
You want folks to unmute or raise a hand? Okay.
Yep. Either way, just unmute or raise your hand. There's a few of us here. It's okay if you don't have questions just yet. I want to make sure here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing for a second, just so I can see all of us here real quick. I want to see us all in gallery. Just give me thumbs up. Are we all getting this? Does this all make sense so far that we're getting this? Okay. You're all still with me? I haven't put most of you to sleep. That's great. Okay. All right, good. So theoretically, what we have at this point is we have these insights. And so now that we have some data that says, okay, we know that it's mainly young people, again, because, was there a question there? I'm sorry. Okay. Our question that we're following here, and I'll continue to follow with, is about this contemporary service. So let's imagine that we came up with a couple of things that we figured out, like they like to find meaning in the service. That's really important to them. Okay, that's great. I thought it was just about the music, right? Most of us think Protestant evangelicalism, and we think it's just about the music, like a little concert. So maybe finding the meaning, or that the fact that childcare is very important because it allows them to actually have that time to be there, that it doesn't have to be on Sunday morning. You're finding out really good information. Think about it. You're finding out that it's not a Sunday morning thing, that childcare is important. So you have to begin with that in mind, that they still have to find meaning, that the talks, great, that's amazing, that it has to speak more coherently to their day-to-day lives. Amazing. These are great insights we're finding. Now comes the time where we can actually start developing the ideas. And so we move into step number 2, developing ideas. So we went from being sort of inquisitive and curious in the first one. Now we want to be playful. If you do this step with your friends, if you do this step and you don't have like moments of just sheer laughter, if you do a brainstorming session and you're not laughing, you've done it wrong. That's my theory. If you're not laughing because you haven't stretched long enough, you haven't stretched far enough to figure out, to reach to the absurdity. I was at a brainstorming the other day. One of the seminaries that owns us, Virginia Theological Seminary, we're reaching the 200th anniversary in 1823. from 1823 to 2023. And they were like, what can we do that's really like out there? And I'm like, woo, what we should do is we should get a little capsule and put in one of those Elon Musk rockets and send it into space so that some alien somewhere there will find it. It'll be like the original charter. They're like, Lorenzo, bring it back. I don't know what you thought the budget was for this, but bring it back. Oh, well, that's the rules of brainstorming. There are no bad ideas. So I just kept going. So anyways, so be playful with this. Be willing to go into space with it even. So again, always begin with prayer, as we have with all the other steps. This is when the Holy Spirit can really be with you, because the divine is creative. The divine wants to be with us and helps us. I heard the other day Rowan Williams talking about God, saying God loves being God. So the moment we even say like, hey, God, God's like, yeah, what is it? What do you want? I'm right here. I've never left you. I'm right here. What do you want? So in the same way, when we invite God to help us with this work, God will definitely show up to do this work with us. So knowing that, we can begin. So we're now shifting our design questions. So what if we did a contemporary service? Remember, that's how we began. Now that we sort of have done more research and we're still here, we're like, how might we do a contemporary service? You notice the difference is like, what if we did a contemporary service has now become like, we have good research now that I think, again, the things that we've mentioned so far, and I don't know if these are true, by the way. This is totally made up by me right now with you all, but that they prefer it not on Sunday, that they prefer to have childcare, and that they prefer that it needs to have meaning, right? Okay, great. It's not just about the music. Awesome. So what if now becomes, how might we? So how might we here at St. Margaret's do this? This first idea that this first sort of framework that I'm going to give you is called mashup, where you will, step number one is you check. I just noticed another 3-step thing. I really am Trinitarian. So you begin with step number one, where you would choose 2 unrelated categories. You will step 2, generate some elements for those categories. And then step number 3, you will mash them up. Let me show you what that means. So imagine that remember, let me go back here. The 2 things, right? 2 unrelated categories. So here's the 2 unrelated categories. For the contemporary people have to have, what do people do in their free time, right? This was for a different idea, so I'm trying to make it about the contemporary. This was actually from the book, and it was the design question in the book was, what if we reached out to retirees in our community, keeping in mind that 10,000 people are retiring a day. And we don't have a lot of young people, so they're not going to find themselves here. But how do we reach out to people that are like us, older people that are more retired? It's like, okay, so the 2 sort of categories were free time and meaning, right? And you just sort of list things. What do people do in their free time? Well, they can read, paint, work out, travel, volunteer, side gig. They can like Uber or something, movies. They can take a class, go to the library, or hobby. Great. Those are things that people do in their free time. How do people find meaning? Well, they can pray, they can meditate, they can serve, they can journal, they can take a class and learn. Poetry is a good way of doing it. Listening to music, some classical music will do that. Being in nature, talking with a friend, donating money. Great. That's how people are finding. So the way you mash them up, remember, if you go back here, is you take the 2, you generate the elements, and then you mash them up. The way you mash up is you're like, is there a way that we could take something to do in their free time, like painting, and we do that with poetry? Oh, what would it look like if we did like a class or like one of those wine poetry nights where we took wine painting nights, and we took poems and we said, we're going to paint what we think this poem. So we get a local poet to read us poetry, and we're going to paint what we think that poem looks like in a piece of artwork, in a religious, and all the poetry has to be like spiritual, not necessarily religious, but spiritual. It has to be about spirit or the divine. Actually, that actually would be a kind of cool idea. Now that I think about it, I would totally go to something like that. It'd be like painting the lines, like, oh, I think this sounds like a yellow color. Anyway, so, and that's what a mashup is. So you could take, for example, what if you did volunteers and you did talking with a friend? So what if volunteers went and talked to people that were otherwise lonely? This loneliness epidemic that we keep hearing about. What if we actually set up volunteers to go talk to people as if though they were friends and actually became friends in doing that? So you sort of get the idea of what a mashup is. You just take from this one, and you can take anything. You can do read, and you can do donating money. It's like, could I read so that people will give money for a cost. Like instead of doing a walkathon or something, could I do a readathon to kids where people will donate money to this after school program? Totally just did that. Could we do painting and meditating? All right. That I'm not quite sure how that would work, but could you paint? Could you meditate and then paint what sort of came to you in your meditation? There's always things, working out, and say, for example, working out and praying. Actually, my friend has that. There's a thing called Warrior Church that he has in Houston, Texas. Anyways, so you see more or less how this works. That's what a mashup is. You just take the two. And these two are relatively close together sort of categories. What if the categories were a little bit further apart, like meaning and luxury hotel, right? Could you actually, these are the same ones that I read before, but luxury hotel, some of the elements from here is like, elegant design, lots of flowers, high thread count, friendly staff, room service, mini bar, great food, live piano music, gift shop, spacious room. All right, cool. So could we take like being in nature and a mini bar? Well, yeah, I suppose we could create a little mini bar that would have some stuff in it that makes it smell or be like being in nature, or the other way around. Could we take an actual little, instead of always just making it like a picnic, could we take like theology on tap out to nature? What would that look like? What would it feel like if we did theology on tap out in nature? Could we do learning and could we do lots of flowers? Well, I guess like a flower design class would be one of them. Praying an elegant design. Could we design a room that a part of the church that is so set up in such a way that would be elegant or really made the way that elegant design is made for luxury? Could we do a room in our church that actually is all about just leads you to pray? It is meant for prayer. And so when you walk in there is no talking, it's always silence. So could you create that? So you sort of get the idea, hopefully, of what a mashup is. You take the categories, you put them together, and you're just coming up with creative ideas. The goal right now, by the way, in all of these examples that I'm giving you in this framework is to come up with as many ideas. Don't worry about how many you have right now. Just keep coming up with ideas. It's better to have gazillions and then you narrow them down, and I'll teach you how to do that in a moment, than to go the other way. So you have that. So that was one. You've done the mashup. Other people's shoes. Remember the empathy experience? We were talking about the parents, we brought the kids. So what would it be like to be those parents? What's it like to be those parents that have the 4 kids and look forward to having a place to put them so they can have a little date night or something? So from the empathy experience, that's what we just did. Imagine their whole day, go step by step, and come up with ideas along the way. Here's what that sort of looks like. Other people's shoes. So again, this was done when I was thinking more about the senior citizens, the retirees looking for, but let's look at the idea. Let's just do it here on the fly. Let's say it was the parents who have the kids and they're just, so what does their day look like? I can only imagine that it is a messy morning as they're getting up, trying to wake up 4 kids to get them ready for school, to trying to get breakfast ready, to, all right, is there a way that we can do something to help them in the morning so that it is a bit more orderly? Could we provide them with like a little podcast that has music for kids that gets them more thinking about like, Sunday school music that could help them in sort of calming the kids as they're getting up, or if the kids are the opposite, if they're all sleepy, sort of gets them more into that. That would be one. Maybe they wouldn't read the paper here, but maybe they drive. And again, maybe that podcast can also help them in the car to provide something for the kids to listen to while they're doing that. So that it provides a little mental space for the parents. During the day, maybe the parent needs a little retreat just to be like, okay, I'm away from the kids. I'm at work right now, so this is good. But when was the last time they took a little Sabbath just for themselves? Maybe you could do an 8-minute Sabbath. It's just a little CD or something, or a little, now it's all digital, but that allows them to have like a 7-minute Sabbath. Is like, hey, welcome. These 7 minutes are for you. Just know that God loves you, and that just for these 7 minutes, you don't have to worry about your kids. They're fine. You don't have to just rest. Breathe with me. Let's do a little centering prayer. Let's do a little piece of scripture. So that could be an idea. So as you go through their day, what's their drive like coming back home? Do they have to figure out dinner? Maybe your church, if you're doing the service, maybe what you do is you provide also a dinner for families beforehand. Or it's like a way of doing it that, you get volunteers to come in and cook a lot of spaghetti and bread. That's not that expensive, and you can do it. And so that way they don't have to worry about like, I've got to pick up the kids and then try to figure out how do I get to the service, but rather it's like, hey, just pick up the kids and come over here. We'll take care of the rest. And we'll have volunteers that do all this. And so if as you go through their day, you can sort of figure like, are there points in there where we could sort of insert ourselves to be part of their lives and help them? If we think that is what this work is all about, right? Helping them find meaning and find God, the divine in their day to day. Could we provide them perhaps with some easy to do sort of spiritual? I have discovered that people really tend to like the ancient practices from the monastics. So is there a way that perhaps we could provide them with a little toolkit, like here, for your workday, for when you're at the office, if you have 5 minutes, instead of picking up the little fidgety thing that my brother has here, it's actually kind of cool. We're gonna provide you with a little, here's how you sort of just take a moment to take 3 deep breaths, or count to 10, whatever it might be, the monastic. And this is some of the research that then you can do. So, but this helps you come up with ideas that you can do as well. Exactly. Have a kids' night out to give the parents the opportunity to actually go out and go to a movie. So to actually be elsewhere, they don't even have to be with you the time. Absolutely. And then why does Sunday school have to be on Sunday? It doesn't. What if Sunday school was Thursday night school and you go have date night? We'll take care of them from 6 to 8 or whatever the time is. So that's one way of doing it. So as you're doing this, then there's another idea, another way of generating ideas is an e-storm. Sounds just like brainstorm, but with an E in front of it, doesn't it? That's exactly what it is. What you want to do is you want to have, if you have a list of like 20 friends or 30 friends that you trust, who you like, maybe other members of the congregation, say, hey, we've moved this far along and now we're at our, how might we do a contemporary service? So put a provocative subject line means like, hey, Vicky, could you give me 2.34 seconds of your time? Just something that's like, what are you talking about? 2 minutes and 34 seconds, something very unusual that they'd be like, what is Vicky on? So that they can find out. And right at the beginning, you manage their expectations saying, hey, listen, I'm part of this thing at church. Really simple. I do this with my nephews all the time. And they're like in their late 20s. I just say, hey, listen, I just need 2 seconds of your time. I just need to ask you, I'm doing this project. Here's the challenge. What would a contemporary service look like to you? Maybe you have some research and you want to figure out whether or not, what would it look like? What are the things what would be the number one thing for a contemporary service must have that you would want to attend? Just one thing. Just tell me the one thing. If you have a picture, send me that too. Maybe they want those little bean bags instead of pews, right? Maybe they want those little cushions or something. So go ahead. And the way you also keep them involved is like, okay, I sent out 100 emails, which you can easily do. It doesn't take long. You just copy paste. And I got from those emails, I got these are the top things that came up. Could you all vote on these and do like a little survey monkey? It's free, and just figure out which ones do you guys like, and then get them to vote. And then you're even testing some of the theories of some of the things that others gave you, which is amazing, right? You're getting ideas and you're sort of like market testing them at the same time. So now you have even more ideas. So at this point, we've done the mashup. We did their day and came up with more ideas. We've done the e-storm and we have more ideas. Now comes my favorite of all time, brainstorm. Woo! So what you want to do is, this will be a time to expand the group a little bit. The right number of people is between 4 and 7. Make sure one's the leader, not necessarily the priest or the senior warden. Just get someone to be the leader, someone that actually can manage people, can be like, shh, everyone, be quiet. We got to talk here, and can move them along. You want to have your very clear question. And it can be, again, the same question we just did in the E thing, which is like, what one thing must it have? Or what would be the coolest way to do the music? Or should we do it in the round? What would it look like? What would the space look like and feel like? Be clear about the questions. And you can do several brainstorming sessions based on several elements. You can do a brainstorming session just on the music. Like, what kind of music do we want? What does it look like? What are the instruments that we must have? And do a brainstorming session on that. Then do another brainstorming session like, okay, what does it actually feel like? And how do we make that feeling happen? Right? I'll give you an example of that, by the way, how you can change a space to be about feeling. We did an experiment called evangelism theater. And we wanted for people to feel like this was home, that this was a good place, right? Because we had asked members of the congregation to invite their friends to this theatrical thing we were doing in the church. And we wanted people who were coming to church who probably had never been to the church to feel really much at home in the church. And the way that we did that is I feel bad. No, we baked cookies. We baked cookies. We took a little oven and we baked cookies. Who has a bad memory about baking cookies? As it turns out, I did a little research. Nobody has not about that. But it's like the sense of smell is the fastest of our senses to bring back memories. So tell me you've never walked into a place and you're like, oh my God, that totally smells like my elementary school cafeteria. I've done that. It's like, oh my God, I am so back in time right now, right? So believe it or not, so we did the cookies and people felt at home. There was this sense of like, this smells homey. There was a fresh coffee smell and it wasn't incense. It wasn't what we were going for that evening. We wanted them to feel at home. So anyways, so make sure that you have, I digress there, didn't I? Make sure you have your leader, the right number of people, your question is right, and know the rules. And you're probably saying to yourself, but Lorenzo, what are those rules? That's a great question. Here they are. There are no bad ideas, even sending stuff out to the moon on Elon Musk's rocket, for crying out loud, people. Don't worry about the budget right now. We trust me, reality itself will come up. But actually more likely than that is that you might be able to actually come up with something that's like the big budget item, but that's less of a budget. And we'll talk about that when we get to the minimum viable prototype here in a second. Dream big, be wild with this, and stay focused. Because like how I just meandered there a little bit, it is very easy. This is why you need a leader to keep you low. Our question is about the music right now. We'll talk about the experience and what it feels like later. Let's focus on the music. Great. Let's do that. Sorry, I meandered, right? So that kind of way. And when you do it, here's another word. When you do it, do one at a time. Do make sure that you're coming up, one person at a time is coming up with ideas. This is perhaps the most important of all the rules. Well, no, they're all important, but this one I just find quantity of ideas that you must come up with is time plus 5 ideas. So if you're giving yourself 10 minutes to come up with ideas, you should come up with 10 plus 5, 15 ideas or no fewer. If you're giving yourself, if you're looking at a big thing and you're looking, okay, we're going to spend 20 minutes doing this, you want 25 ideas. Every time that I have done this, the best ideas that like give you little goosebumps and you're like, oh my God, if we did that, that would be amazing. It's in the plus 5. The easy ones come first. That's just nature. That's just, all right, we can do this type of music. We can bring in some drums. We can do that. It's when you get to like, okay, we're going to totally like fill up glass and we're going to use like marbles up against that, whatever it might be. But when you're coming up with really innovative stuff, it's in the T plus 5. In the plus 5 sections when you're actually coming up with it. So keep that in mind as you do it. Be open, have fun, and again, laugh. If for whatever reason, I know I kidded about this earlier, if for whatever reason you're in a brainstorming session and you're not having fun and you're not laughing, stop. Just stop. Do it another day. You will not get the good ideas that day. You will not be able to come up with something. In fact, you're likely to come up with stuff that doesn't work. Just stop. Just something's wrong, something's off. Try to figure out maybe one of the people in the team, something's going on, and the whole team has been affected. This is classic family systems. You just stop though. Don't do it. If you're not having a good time, please stop, because you're likely to come up with ideas that don't work. And the worst thing would be to come up and try to do an idea based on this that's not going to work because it came out of a bad space. So just keep that in mind. All right. So many ideas, Lorenzo. What do we do? Well, you begin clustering them. Put them by themes. You're going to end up with, imagine that you got a really good response to your email and you had like 50 ideas from there, and you did your mashup and you have like 20 ideas from there. And you got 20 ideas from doing the day in the live, and then your brainstorming gave you like another 30 ideas. So let's say you have like 100 ideas. When you begin clustering, you're probably going to end up with about 5 themes within which so just begin clustering them. Like, can this one be with this one? Yes, make sure that everyone's involved. Start discarding. All right, so it turns out going to the moon, I don't even know Elon Musk, so it's probably going to be hard to get something into his rocket. All right, fine. I take defeat, and then just start voting. Like, which one of these ideas sound really, really good? And just start withering it down. You will know by the emotion. You will know because you will sense excitement in you that, oh, this feels really, really good. This is feeling amazing. So as you're clustering them down, just go with your gut feeling. That's where I think the Spirit is with us. And then you have some ideas. Then you will have ideas to go with, which is amazing. So you began with generating the insights, which allowed you to create ideas that were more specific about this contemporary service. And then you end up at the end now, you have a whole bunch of ideas and you've narrowed it down to maybe 2 or 3 ideas. And now we're about to begin the step number 3 of trying. But before we do, we're gonna take a little pause here just to make sure everyone's still okay with me. How's it going, people? How's it going, friends? Give me a thumbs up. Any questions? All right, everyone's there. Everyone's having a good time. Fine. All right. These, by the way, these workshops are a lot more fun in person. Oh, I miss in-person meetings. All right, here we go. Let's continue on then. We are just like moving along. All right, it is time for step number 3. Trying. Dun, 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 dun. All right. Oh, sorry. That should have come up when I was doing my soundtrack. So the mindset for this one, remember, we began with being curious. Our mindset for the second one was being playful, and our mindset for this third one is being bold. I used to say being entrepreneurial, but a lot of people just didn't like the word because they're like, oh, it was very easy for them to say, like, I'm not an entrepreneur, so I'm out. That's not who I am. It's like, so just be bold. This is where we take those steps of faith, but this framework will help you in doing this. So let me introduce you to the mission canvas. Do not worry, do not panic. I'm about to make it bigger and you will have it as one sheet in your PDF. Do not worry. A mission canvas is based on Lean Canvas from the business world. This is what it is. It's something you can fill out in 15 minutes. The order is only suggested. It's okay to skip things you don't know right now because you're going to come back to it once you know more information. And you want to do one for each idea. So let's imagine that we ended up with 2 ideas. And the ideas, let's say, for example, that one of the ideas is a kids' night out that somebody wrote on there, kids' night out. And another one of the ideas, let's say that it was to do it, that we were going to do a worship service that was for kids. Yeah. Oh, Sunday school at night. So it's not even worship. All right, let's just say that those were the ideas. I just wrote those down so that I would have them. So the mission canvas, this is what it looks like, and a little bit closer. What you see is a 1-page sort of business plan, if you will. It's a 1-page ministry plan. But that if you came up with an idea and Bishop Doug was like, yeah, okay, come back with a mission plan and make sure it's 80 pages, you'd be like, oh God, I'm not gonna do that. That's gonna take forever. What this does though, is one sheet of paper that forces you to look at 9 different areas. It forces you, in other words, to say, is my idea holistically thought out? Or am I just so excited by it that I've only thought about, like, this is what it's going to do? All right, and this is sort of what it looks like. The first one is going to be it went the wrong way, is the need. In other words, what are we trying to do? Is like, well, we are trying to create a contemporary service for our neighborhood. Our solution is, it turns out that we're going to do a kids' night out. That was the first one. Great. Who are the stakeholders in this? Well, we're going to have to get obviously the vestry, the wardens, the rector. Do we need to get any diocesan approval? Do we need to get any insurance because we're going to have kids and maybe we're going to have, rest assured, there's going to have to be extra training that happens for those kids, right? For a safe church. So you need to start figuring out from the stakeholders, who are the ones that sort of are going to want to have a little bit of influence over this to make sure whether or not it works. Then what's your elevator pitch? And it might be like, hey, we at St. John's are going to create a kids' night out so that the parents can have a date night. And in that kids' night out, it's all going to be godly play. A godly play, kids' night out, where they're growing in their faith, but the parents get a night to just be by themselves. And we're also, and by the way, I'll in a moment here, the path, do we have a way, what the path is, do we have a way of getting to the people that would take advantage of this night out? Do we have, yes, you do, by the way, the answer is yes. Facebook will get you to those people. It is considerably easier nowadays to advertise on Facebook, just geographic areas, to parents of young kids, and just put an ad saying like, hey, are you kind of like stressed out? Do you need a night out? Let us help you out. We'll teach your kids morals. We're not proselytizing them. We're just going to teach them some good information, but you get a night out. Number 6, are there any partners? This is where I was jumping to ahead a moment. Maybe you go to some restaurants Maybe you go to some of the restaurants in your community and be like, hey, so we're going to do this thing called a night out for parents and kids. Would you be willing to offer like a discount if they've left their kids with us? Would you give them 10% off, 20% off if they come? And they might be like, yeah, can we do it like on a Tuesday night when it's a really slow night for me? It's like, yeah, sure, why not, right? You can figure it out. I know that earlier I said the order is only suggested, but number 7 and 8, I would encourage you to keep in this order. You want to look at the funding sources before you look at the expenses. And here's why. If we sit here and go like, okay, so how much money do we think we come up with? Vicky's like, well, I think we have $100 from this budget. And then Rich is like, oh, I think we have like another 200 from this other budget. And then Bishop Doug's like, hey, you're trying something new, so I'm going to give you $100 from my own budget. And then Kathy's like, well, we have another $200 that we have over here. So great, we have $500. Then we're like, okay, how do we make it happen for $500? I don't even know how much money it would take, but that's a different approach than if you do the expenses first and you're like, aha, it's going to cost us $2,000. And then we do what we just did. We're like, but we only have 500. Oh, well, then we're done. That's it. We can't do this idea. You see the difference in the mindset? If you come at it first from like, we have this, how do we make it work? Versus it's going to cost us this, but we only have this, which is like already setting you up for failure. If you begin with like what we have, go from that abundance place, like, oh, we can make it work for 500. Trust me, this is how we'll do it. So those two I actually suggest that you do. And number 9 is, how will we measure if what we're doing is working or not? How will we measure whether or not this is a good idea in the end, if this is something to? And for each congregation, it's going to be a different thing, by the way. You might be like, well, we got some parents and they've asked us about baptism. So like if we can baptize another kid from it, or if we can get someone to join the church, or if we just want to make goodwill amongst the community for us, whatever it is, yeah, you know, if people show up to Tuesday night and we're giving Christian formation to young kids, that's a win for us. Brilliant. That's it, right? You don't have to necessarily get them in on Sunday mornings. So again, the key metrics are for you to decide, but you want to think about this before you do it, not after like, hey, did that work? How do we feel about that, right? You want to sort of go in with that. So again, this is what the mission canvas looks like. If it doesn't work or you can change something, again, if you might not know what the path is, you might be like, oh, I need to find out like I have a friend though, who works for a PR firm who might tell me how I can get to those people to tell them we're doing this. Or my elevator pitch, I really need to, it's too clunky. I need someone to help me wordsmith that to make it smaller and really refine, like St. John's is offering a parents and kids night out, you know, something like that. That sounds good and what the value that we're giving to them is. So once you have your 2, then you do need to sort of decide. This is a great idea when you're about to decide which of the 2 ideas to go with. Go back to the stakeholders, go back to the congregation, say like, we have these 2 great ideas. Which one do you think we should do? Tell us, let's all do this together. They're both amazing. And then figure out which ones you can honestly and faithfully do. Which one do we want to do? Which one feels right for us? Pray about it. Bring the Spirit back into this. All right. And now you're ready to actually go out and try it. And let me tell you about, this is perhaps one of the most important parts of this whole thing, the minimum viable prototype. Remember when I did the spin class that I told you we didn't go out and actually like build, you know, I didn't sign a lease for 5 years or for 3 years for a spinning studio and go out and buy bicycles and hire staff only to realize that it didn't work. No, what we did is we tried to figure out, like, how will we know if this is working? So we used our mission canvas and we said, since considering our key metrics, right? Considering number 9, what we're going to measure, how can we know without actually building the whole thing out? And we start stripping out. And to some extent, we did 2 things. One, for us, it was like, well, we'll see how many people respond on Facebook. That'll tell us whether or not at least there's a there there. If we put some ads on Facebook and no one is looking, maybe there's no there. Maybe there's just nothing. And Lorenzo's just, gone cuckoo over with Cuckoo's Nest. So the same way, if you're doing a kids' night out, you might put an ad that says, hey, are you looking for a night out? St. John's wants to offer parents a night out, and we'll take care of your kids in a fun environment that's safe, secure, with nurses, whatever it might be. You know, X number of people, lots of people. We're going to feed them, and you get a night out, and you know they're fine. See whether or not anybody chimes in for more information. See if anybody signs up. Put up one page within your website that is just about this, and say, for more information, give us your email here. So if you get people to look at your ad and they come to your page, but they don't give your email. They may not be that interested. If they come to your page and give you them, you might have some people that are like really interested. Like, that sounds like a great idea. Please tell me how I do this. Tell me how we can make this work. So you strip away, right? You don't have to go out and say, we're going to do this every week from now until Jesus' second coming. You can say, we're going to do it for the season of Christmas. Only for 4 times or maybe once a month. We're going to start and just do it, during summer when there's vacation Bible school, the parents need a night off. Great, we're going to help you with that. So whenever you think that there's the greatest need, just try it once, try it twice. Begin with ads. If the ads aren't getting a response, figure out like, okay, are we not doing something right? Then maybe go back to the insights part and go talk to some parents and say like, hey, so we're thinking of doing this. Can I ask you, would you ever leave your son with a church that you've never heard of before? Because that might be an issue, right? It's like, I've never heard of your little church. Oh, but we've been around since 1865. Oh, well, tell me more about you guys. I don't know that. Okay. How would we have to tell you that we're a secure place? And maybe what you find is that there is a market for it, but that they just don't know you, and that there's a way that you can overcome that. So you see how you can keep going back to find out more insights that will then allow you to come up with a real minimum viable prototype. And again, try for a season. I love the ecclesiastical calendar because it allows you to say, oh, we're only going to do this for the 4 weeks of Advent. Yay. And then it can go, and nobody has to be like, oh, they meant it to be only for Advent. So smart of them. Rather than it's going to be here forever and ever. Don't you worry and you're having to make a huge investment. That's what a minimum viable prototype is. You use your mission canvas and you strip away everything to figure out, how do we test whether there's a there. And then you go out and try it. Good enough is good enough, friends. You will never get perfection. You always have to be wondering to yourself, what's the very next step that I can take to move this closer to its fruition? It's okay to gauge interest using Facebook, Google ads. Little side note here, I'm sure you're all aware that every nonprofit gets $10,000 worth of advertising on Google per month for free. It's called the Google Grant. I encourage you to Google it. See what I did there? No, there's actually even books on it. There's agencies that specialize in helping you get they charge you like $300 a month or something, but they will help you get, because Google is very strict about what you can and cannot do in the ads and how to do them. But you could, if part of your charism was Kids Night Out, for example, you could own basically those words, something for my kids to do, or the next time that somebody types in babysitters, if they're willing to take a stranger in their home to watch their kids, why wouldn't they drop them off at a church, right? Type thing, right? So you could own those words in your community. Anytime somebody types in babysitter, and by the way, I just saw it this week in the Wall Street Journal, babysitting is $25 an hour now. I think we're all in the wrong line of work. Why are we doing more babysitting for people? Can we just open up babysitting centers? That might be the best thing to do to raise money. Anyway, so it's okay to do the Google ads, especially if they're free. You want to refine and update your mission canvas as you go, and reality starts hitting. It's like, oh, we thought our path was going to be much clearer, but it turns out that they don't, what we just did, that they don't know us, so they don't know whether or not to trust us with their kids. So how do we do that? Do we bond ourselves? Do we say that we're bonded and insured, and that everyone goes through training, and that we have the security measures? Those kinds of things are things you want to do. And then you try again. And by the way, this is sort of what it looks like. You try, you evaluate, you iterate, say like, we're going to do this again, or nobody showed up, nobody was there, Lorenzo. Get off the bicycle and just walk away. So you iterate and you just come. And the best part about it is, because you came up with so many ideas, even if this one didn't work, just go back and pull one of the other ones and be like, okay, let's do a mission canvas for that one. How much can it cost us to, a couple $100 to figure out whether or not there's a there? You could do a whole bunch of them. Do not let money be the reason why you're not trying things, especially if the Google Grant is free. So if all you're going to do is try out things that could eventually work out really well, you can do it for free. That's what's amazing. Somebody was telling me, hey, Lorenzo, we want to build a pre-K. I'm like, great. Because I know of some congregations where they fund themselves by having a preschool, an art school. And I said, great. Have you tested out the market? Like, no, we're just going to. So I think we have someone who's going to give us $50,000 to turn it. It's like, whoa. We appreciate their $50,000, but before you take their money and not know what you're doing, I told them, can you run some ads? Oh, well, we don't really have the money unless they give us the money to get. So, but if we take the money, then we have to build. It's like, okay, how about this? Just find someone to give you $30, put a banner and hang it right over your fence where your preschool is going to be. And just put like, preschool coming, find out more here. if you don't have enough traffic, that people don't know you're there, and you don't get people then going to your website to find out more information, then maybe you don't have a thing there. Or I said, go and talk to the economic development office of your city. Ask them about it. It's like, are there enough young parents with kids who would welcome a preschool here? Is this something that would work? Or are there already so many that we're going to be competing, and I don't know how? Have you figured out what the licensing requirements are? Have you figured what's going to differentiate you from the other ones? All these things are like, oh, maybe we don't want the money. Sometimes when someone's like writing us a check, we're like, we'll take it for anything. Preschool, of course we can build a preschool. It's like, can you though? Or should you build a preschool? In all of these things, you want to figure out in the evaluation, is it what you thought? Was it worth it for us to spend our Tuesday night here with 20 rugrats running around driving us crazy? Is this something we want to do? Is this really who we are? Is this what we feel called to do? It's okay if it didn't work. Oh, X number of people signed up, but only 2 signed up. That might just be that you need more traction. If at least one of them showed up, then you're okay. But it's okay we did it for 8 weeks on the bicycles, 8 weeks, and nobody ended up coming. So it's like, we realized, okay, so it wasn't that there wasn't traction. There just wasn't a there. And then ask yourself, is it something worth doing? Is this where God and the Holy Spirit is calling us, who we're being called to be in our community? It could be something else. And you might look at it after doing it once, be like, wow, you know what? It sounded much better as an idea. Once we did it, that was a lot of work. I'm not sure we want to do that even once a month. That's just, and also it didn't feel spiritual for us, or it didn't feel like we were actually forming the kids. It felt like just we were babysitting the kids, and that's just not what we want to do. If I want to babysit on Tuesday night, I'm not going to give up, like Final Jeopardy to be with some rugrats that I don't even want to get along with. So whatever it might be. So just be honest with yourselves. And if you've gone through the whole process by keeping up and having conversation and bringing the stakeholders in, it's much easier to have the honest conversation about, is this who we are? Is this who we want to be? Remember, all along, get others involved, get the stakeholders, make sure they're buying in. This is the final thing that I want to mention to you guys. In all of this work, there's an in-between time, and it is a spiritual discipline. From the moment that you have an idea to when you actually have the event or whatever it is launched, there's a long period where you're getting licenses, where you're getting the food, who's going to volunteer for this, and you're putting the invitations together, and you're doing this. And why do we print invitations that happen to be 1/8 of an inch bigger than the envelope? That's happened to me once. All of these things, and you're like, oh my God, this is taking forever. The image that I want to leave you with is, it's kind of like when you begin a road trip, and you have like your windows rolled down, and the wind is in your hair. You're listening to Tom Petty, and it's like battering down the highway. It's amazing, and life is great. And then an hour later, you're like, oh, is it still going? And then 2 hours in, you're like, oh, we're now at Boston traffic. Oh, this is going to take a while. And then it starts raining, and then you're in traffic and rain. It's like, are we even closer to where we're going? This is taking forever. Can we just go back? That's the in-between time. It's a spiritual discipline to keep doing this work. It's not going to happen as quickly or as you thought it might happen. We all have this beautiful vision that's romantic and beautiful of how all the kids are just going to sit there in a circle wanting to learn from me about Christian formation. And in reality, they're like climbing from something that I didn't even know existed up there. It's like, who even puts that up there? Exactly how the kids are. So just remember, the in-between time is different, and it's all about Jesus. All of this work is for the kingdom of God and Jesus' gospel. All of this is in much more detail in a very simple book. It's only 120 pages, so you can literally read it in like 2 hours, unless if you're my mother and have to comment about every single sentence that I wrote in there. But if you do happen to get the book, by the way, please leave a review. That actually helps with the things. So now it's time to try the newsletter, as I promised you earlier. If you go to trytank.org, you can sign up for the newsletter. And once a month, we put out calls for our partners. We pay for everything when we do experiments with you. So if you feel also here, my email is here, lorenzo@trytank.org. If you're having an idea and you want a conversation partner, please reach out. I'd love to have a conversation with you. There's no charge or anything for that. It's what I do. And I set certain hours during my week aside just to talk to people like you that are trying new things that may be like, I'm stuck here. What is my very next step? And let me help you out. I would love to be able to do that with you. And so with that, thank you very much. Woot woot. So I hope you all liked it. I know I went at a speed, but that's just my speed. Yeah.